I'm very glad to be here and feel privileged to participate in Teal around the world again. I know that the intent of this forum is to focus a lot on organizations and how we work with people and design, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk to you about what has brought the group of people together who work on NIAGA, the purpose and mission we're fulfilling. And so I'm going to take about 10 or 15 minutes to kind of go through what NIAGA is before I address how we work and some things that are pretty special about it. So NIAGA is a team of people who redesign everyday things to make sure that 100% of the materials can be reused, recovered, and recycled. And our brand, NIAGA, is the word again spelled backward because we redesign things so they can be used again and again and again. I'm going to start with why we come to work every day. I'm going to tell you how we do what we do at NIAGA and then get into our organizational design, since that's what a lot of you are probably most interested in. So why do we come to work every day? Everyone at NIAGA has a little bit different purpose. And so if you heard their individual stories, some people are passionate about materials and some people are passionate about toxicity and some people are passionate about waste. But the most important thing is that we all care a lot about something, a piece of the puzzle to make the future better than the current state. And here's some pictures that I like to show about things that keep me up at night. We work today in 3 different industries. It's just the first 3. There are many that are still ripe for change, but we've chosen to focus on bulky household waste issues, household and office waste. And you might be surprised to know that about 5 billion pounds or 2.5 kilotons of carpet, million kilotons, go into landfill or incineration every year. 35 to 38 million mattresses are discarded and burned or put in the landfill every year. And people are spending more than 100 million euros a year just in these 3 categories, with more than 95% of all these materials ending up in the trash or being burned. Not to mention the fact that people have really driven so much performance in materials and in stain resistance and pet guards and all these other things, that there's a lot of toxic chemicals inside of our homes and offices. And people in Western countries like the United States and Europe report that sometimes as many as 65% of households are suffering from some sort of respiratory distress, like asthma or allergies. And that's pretty scary at a time when we're spending about 90% of our time indoors. These things, this awareness of materials and the awareness of the impact that we're having has really got to change for the future, so we don't leave these problems to our children and their children to figure out. So NIAGA cares a lot about moving from a linear economy to a circular economy. And if you just look at these symbols, this is representing trash, everything that just kind of single-use plastics and things that are headed for landfill and incineration today. Then almost every company out there cares about recycling and sustainability. And so there's a lot of recycling initiatives, but the truth is a lot of things end up being downcycled and turned into something with much less value. And we're really out here to figure out how to keep all these materials in circulation, and by building things the right way up front, so the materials can be reused and again and again. So we're here to design out waste. So how does NIAGA do this? We want to design out waste completely. We want to live in a world where all products are designed to use again so they don't end up in the trash. And we really want all of us, you, me, my family, everybody out there, to be working in healthy living environments and protecting people and the planet by thinking upfront about the long-term impact we're having. We do this by applying 3 very simple design principles to every category we touch. We start with keeping it simple. Where it's possible, we like to use 1 material so that we can mechanically recycle things and get all the materials back and cheaply keep them onto their second life. We prefer, if we do have to use more than 1 material, we want to put them together in a way that they can be easily separated at the end of life. And we want to be very picky about the materials that we use in products so that they are known to be highly recyclable, that there are existing methods to reuse and repair them, and that we really minimize the use of any toxic ingredients or substances of concern. The first category that we worked in was carpet, and we have worked on redesigning carpets, tiles, rugs. And there's a lot of attention being paid in this category that's creating a lot of pressure we think is absolutely fantastic. There's been a lot of research and a lot of NGOs who brought the issues to the attention about the amount of waste that goes into the landfill, about how there's a lot of greenwashing in this industry, and about how American carpets can have as many as 44 different toxic ingredients and European carpets 55. And there's really a big push to get back to simpler, more thoughtful designs and things so that we can get these materials back and use them again and again. In mattresses, there's also a very nice initiative to change the way that we're building mattresses. So you still get a very comfortable and safe sleep, but at the end of life, these mattresses aren't going to sit on a curb because they have a lot of value, and we can reuse and recycle all the pieces again and again. And we're also working on changing the way that the laminated panels that are used in furniture and hard flooring and other surfaces are built so that all the materials can be separated, recycled, and reused again at the end of life. So these are just the first 3 areas that we've been playing in with leading manufacturers. We can apply our design principles to many others over time. The other very important thing about circularity is you can build a product that's recyclable all day long, but if you don't get it back, it's not really recycled at all. And so in addition to having a lot of bright engineers and chemists and scientists and very creative people that think about designing with the end in mind, we also have teams within NIAGA that really think about the other pieces of the puzzle, like how do you get it back? How do you recycle it? What is the next application further down in its life? Because we got to be thinking now about what happens when a mattress comes back in 5 years or a carpet comes back in 7 years. And we have to do this in an environment where a lot of this infrastructure doesn't exist. So there are some capabilities for recycling and for returning things in 2021. It's going to be wildly different in 2023 and 2025, especially. And then it'll even be different in Singapore and Los Angeles and Paris. So we have a lot of work to do to not only monitor the situations around the world and build products that work locally, but make sure that every one of the manufacturers we collaborate with, that we have a plan for the entire ecosystem to get those materials back, even in the rudimentary early loops that we're building practically right now. Another very special thing that happens in NIAGA is we want to stay associated with the products that we redesign so that we share responsibility for the third moment of truth. So if the first moment of truth as a brand or a manufacturer is when people choose your product, your mattress or your shampoo or your toothpaste, you usually have to do some sort of communication or marketing to get them to pick you. And then the second moment of truth is when people use the product, it has to meet the expectations you set for it, or else you have an unhappy consumer. Well, we want to be relevant in the third moment of truth when someone's done with something. It's damaged, it's old, it's time to replace it. We want to be that partner at the third moment of truth that works with you to keep this thing out of the trash and keep all these materials in circulation. And we do that with digital tools. We put a tag with a QR code on every product that communicates this has been redesigned with NIAGA and NIAGA technology. And when you scan that QR code or interact with that NFC chip, it takes you to a landing page for the product where you can get information about what's in it. I'm going to revisit that topic in a minute when we talk about radical transparency, but also return instructions that will keep getting updated and more dynamic as the recycling network changes. So that's some basics about NIAGA. We're 8 years into building this company, and we were within a very big chemical company in the Netherlands called DSM, and we've recently transitioned to a new owner with Covestro in Germany. And there's about 30 people dedicated to this work in NIAGA on a daily basis. So let's talk about how we work, because a few years ago, we had a pretty typical looking org chart, and it had lots of layers and lots of people and managers and employees. And we were looking at it together, and people were kind of grateful to see the organization because we'd never looked at an org chart before. But they also said, this doesn't feel like us. We don't feel like we have all these levels and all that power and all that hierarchy. And that was a time when I was hearing a lot about Richard Semler's work and about ocracy and holacracy and sociocracy. And so in front of this team, I said, well, how would you feel about creating a circular organization to support our circular ambitions? And people liked that idea. So we created a committee, and you could either be a creator, a designer, and participate in some workshops and read some books and figure out how to draft our organizational design, or you could be an editor, but everybody had to engage in the process of figuring out how we were going to work differently. And we also had to do it inside the construct of an 8 billion euro chemical company that we had to get kind of permission to organize in a different way. So this is the NIAGA team as of last September. And we were lucky to have an in-person meeting during COVID times because we spend a hell of a lot of our hours trapped behind these computer screens. And this is the organization that we built together. So we created a circular organization. It's a self-organized team design. And we started first with the values of how we wanted to work together. Every NIAGA employee has signed a partnership for a drama-free NIAGA as a starting point. But then we took it a few levels deeper and we chose these values about how we wanted to work. And you can read them, but there's a few of them that seem particularly special to me coming from big corporations and smaller businesses in the past. Radical transparency, I'm going to talk a little bit more about. Sometimes people ask us, well, I know what transparency is, but what makes it radical? Fierce inclusion, everybody hears the words diversity and inclusion, but what makes NIAGA's inclusion fierce? And zero subordination, does it really work to build a company where no one has a boss and then everyone is one person and everyone is equal? So these are some of the principles that we had to agree to and that we launched our organization with. There are 3 types of teams in NIAGA. We have growth teams, service teams, and a source team. And the growth teams are responsible for building our sub-ventures in carpet and mattresses and furniture. And they're using a venturing framework called the Bell Mason framework to take concepts from concept to seed to alpha to beta to commercialization by learning as fast as possible and hitting key milestones. They're backed up by circular service teams, and I'll show you the names of those teams in a minute, who work across those 3 teams with a consistent approach to innovation, to manufacturing, to circle closing, to marketing. And then our source team is not a management team. Our source team is a group of people where, in addition to me and Chris, who's on the phone, our founder of NIAGA, and our finance leader and our lawyer and our IP attorney, we have 1 member from each of the teams that represents the group. And so it's not a closed door organization. Every one of our meetings can be attended by anyone on the team. And that can be a rotating responsibility. If someone's on holiday or if they just want to shift that within their team, they can send a different delegate. This is what it looks like 1 layer deeper, 3 growth teams. We can always add a growth team if we want to make sunglasses or shoes or something else in the future. And the service teams are the innovation team, including the folks that run our pilot assets, operations. Movement Mobilizers is the name of our marketing team, and they're also responsible for that radical transparency digital passport work. And then the circle closers are a team that you don't see in very many companies. Not only have we had recycling experts and engineers there to think about recycling technology, but also a cultural anthropologist who's just curious and saying, we got to change how the world works. How does it work now and how can it work later? And she brings a really unique perspective to conversations. So one thing that's important about our work is we really want to minimize the bureaucracy, but we want a minimum standard that applies to all of our teams. And so every NIAGA team every year starts with a plan on a page, and they have to be able to articulate their wildly important goals for the year, as well as the critical work streams that are going to happen in their team, and a quarterly deliverable that will credibly get them to their desired state by the end of the year. And then these plans on a page kind of go through a bit of a catch-ball because we have to agree that the team's work complements each other, that it represents what we're doing with each of our frontrunner partners, and that it works cross-functionally. So we put a lot of time into that work, and then on a quarterly basis, we revisit it. But generally within the team, they'll have a really high quality dialogue about, are they doing what they said they would do and what are they learning? But they color code them. If it's black, it's complete. If it's green, it's on track. If it's yellow, it's stuck or stalled. And if it's red, it's really in trouble and it needs some attention. And so it's a very quick and easy way on one page to kind of calibrate and make sure we're going where we said we would. Only once every 2 weeks, the entire NIAGA team is invited to a 1-hour meeting where we have a standing agenda and 2 teams at a time give an update. So we cycle through our 8 teams 2 at a time, and everybody presents and goes into detail about, are they on track with their milestones? What's coming up? Do they see any risks or concerns? What are they achieving? And we calibrate as well on how people are feeling. Are they in their stretch zone? Are they in their panic zone? And how are they feeling about their workload? And then all NIAGA teammates are invited to a workshop. It used to be 4 times a year, and now it's 3 times a year. The first one is a planning workshop. The second one's an execution workshop. And the third one is about finishing strong. And we've loved doing those in person with some team building and some fun and some outside speakers. And we had made a dinner with a chef last time. But sadly, during COVID, we've largely been transitioning these to online sessions. And at the same time, each one has an organizing committee, and they really try hard to make the next meeting better than last. And they've all been very dynamic experiences, even when we were stuck behind our computer screens. So this is the basics. Every single team just has to do these 3 things. But then within their teams, they get complete freedom about how they organize themselves and which tools that they use. In NIAGA, this idea of a radical transparency, fierce inclusion, deep collaboration, it extends to our partnerships. We don't have customers and suppliers. We talk to everyone as a partner because we are better together. They're the ones that have been manufacturing carpets or mattresses for 50 years. We are here with a lot of bright science and keen love of the circular economy and of redesign to help them to go in a new direction and to change their capabilities and to adopt new processes and new materials. And that can only be done together in a very close collaboration where you're all willing to admit the days it doesn't go so well, which we call ta-da moments. We don't shrink away from the days it's tough. We sort of go ta-da. And then if you're open and transparent about the bad days, you can generally turn them into aha moments, which get to your breakthroughs. So these are some of the people we work with. These are a lot of European players who are signed up to go all the way to transition their portfolios to fully circular solutions. We're very proud of the group that has been evolving with front runners in each one of these categories who are really willing to take courageous steps to change the way that we transact, the way we build materials, the way we take responsibility for them in the future. And so hopefully you guys will write down some of these brands and buy their products when you need a new mattress or you need some carpet or you need a kitchen, because you're going to get very thoughtfully designed materials that can be reused and repurposed from these brands. So I want to go a little deeper in our organization on fierce inclusion, radical transparency. We talk about it a lot, and I think it is quite different. We're always asked, what is so fierce about NIAGA's inclusion and what's radical about NIAGA's transparency? And 3 of the points that I would like to make, first of all, is everyone in NIAGA has a voice. And we work really hard to create safe spaces and methods for everyone to share, to debate, to listen, and to learn. It's not always happy, happy, joy, joy. People get very angry at each other. And if they're very passionate and they're very strongly opinionated because they're experts. And at the same time, we really try to make it safe to say whatever you have to say and to be yourself. And that is sometimes easier for your extroverts than it is for your introverts. And so we also create methods like having cards that you have to fill out at our meetings so that everybody has to write down what they're thinking and everybody has to contribute what's on their minds. And so that creates a much safer way for people who are shy or people who don't really want to blurt out the first thing on their minds to fully participate and to draw their insights and their ideas into the conversation. The second thing is we care a lot about sharing information and insights so people can choose what's right for them, especially where materials are concerned. And so we live in a world today where after years and years of legislation, food labeling is pretty good. If you look at a food label, even though some of them are very manipulative, you can generally see what's in it. The ingredients are listed in the order that they're consumed. You know how many fats and carbs and everything is inside of a food label. But you generally are still marketed to based on what's not in something versus what is in something. And then when it comes to household goods, we often just expect that no stores would have stuff that wasn't perfectly safe for us. And yet you don't know what people have sprayed on your things for flame retardants or soil resistance or stain resistance or the chemicals in your cosmetics or in your shampoo or in your cleaning supplies. And so we want to be a part of a movement to tell people what is in stuff, including anything that shouldn't be there in long term and the work that you're doing to get rid of it. And we call that ingredient transparency that goes beyond food. So every product that NIAGA designs with our frontrunner partners, we insist on creating a digital passport for it that not only tells you what's in it, but if some people are even going so far to say exactly where they got it, you know, exactly what's in it. And then if there is an ingredient in there that is less desirable, you get to choose as a consumer what's right for you in your home, in your office, versus leaving it up to the rest of the world. And the last point is that we don't really expect everyone to get along or to see things the same way. We just expect respect. And one of the nicest things I heard last year, what happened when one of our colleagues retired, and then we've kept him on as a consultant. But when we were at his going away party, he said he had worked, you know, for 50 years and he was retiring. And he said, only in the last couple of years at NIAGA have I experienced a team where not only do people have my back, but I feel their hand on my back. And that's a different concept, but that sort of says that in spite of allowing a lot of turmoil and change and forcing change and having different opinions, you know that the people around you really want you to succeed and they want you to lean forward and it's okay to take risks. And that was a very high compliment, but I think that I feel that way at NIAGA too. So when you become transparent, you take this risk that you're going to share everything with everybody. And someone asked me once, can you really share strategy and budget and financial information priorities with everybody? I mean, there's 30 people on your team. And yes, you can. It's not easy and it's not clean. Sometimes it's quite messy, but we do notice that people are much more invested in what's happening and including the bad days and including the setbacks when they were a part of choosing it. We believe that things best happen with people and not to people. And so the way that we've set up our source team with representation from each team, we've also set up our finance activities. So the budgets are set by the teams. And we had to go through a pretty disruptive year last year when we were bought and integrated from DSM into Covestro. And they have their own culture. It's a whole new culture to get inside. But we were challenged to say, can we still be ourselves? And we had a moment when I had to give a strategy update to the Covestro leadership team. And I didn't know if they were going to let me bring the whole team to the table because they might want to be really hard on me and they might want to ask really difficult questions. But I asked for permission to have every NIAGA teammate on the phone when we were going through the business review, expecting to hear no, but delighted when they said yes. It was totally fine if everybody participated in that forum. And they leaned into the transparency that we experience as daily life because we really believe it's that powerful. Another question is, who gets to decide what we get to share about the ingredients and the materials in our stuff? And this is a really painful question, because inside of any nutrition or chemical or food company, their recipes are secret. Coca-Cola's recipe for Coca-Cola has been secret for 100 years. And it's a lot of intellectual property and a lot of paradigms have been set up around hiding information and calling it a trade secret or calling it patented or protected by IP. And yet, how are we supposed to make good decisions as individuals and consumers when you don't really ever know what is in stuff? And so we are really pushing the envelope for being transparent and open about things. And when there is something that needs to be out of stuff over time, own it. Talk about it. Talk about the challenge of getting that ingredient out and the work that you're doing to get to where you want to be in the long run. We think people deserve that transparency. So as you experience NIAGA products and you experience the digital passports, our partners are really working hard with us to make the entire supply chain and all ingredients transparent. And we're very, very big proponents of legislation that's coming to bring those type of food labeling standards into all categories and all goods. How do you resolve differences in an intense and urgent zero subordination tea-based culture? And how do we do that? And one thing is we had coaches for every single team, and that was very nice for a long time. Now we don't, but at least it's a few years further in our evolution. But we do believe that people are the best observers of each other and themselves. And if we can create a place where it's safe to give feedback, we'll let it go for a long time. We love the retrospective process in agile ways of working to bring people together, not just to talk about the content and the advances and the stories that are being completed, but how are you feeling? How are you feeling about your work together? Are there things that need to happen to elevate this team? All NIAGA colleagues get a 360 feedback every 2 years. That's a very positive experience. And we have had times when things are not headed in the right direction, and we'll pull them together in what we call a QAC, which is a quick urgent aligning conference call. And that will usually be a session to present a problem or an opportunity, get everybody's thoughts and feelings and ideas around it together, and then leave with concrete actions to make it better than it was before. And those things can take 20 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes, but it's just about really stepping up to creating the outcome you're looking for versus sitting in drama for too long. And it's very safe to ask for help to go through that process. We had one team in December who was really struggling and not getting along at all. We had a QAC to let them talk about the pain and frustration they were having. And it's amazing that it's only 3 months later and they're completely flying and really have a lot of momentum and driving great results right now. So you can turn around a pretty ugly situation if people feel safe enough to be open and honest, and then to finally see each other again. 3 helpful tools that are, the QAC is one of them that I just mentioned in NIAGA. It's a very easy way to get people together off cycle or outside of the structured meetings. We also ask every single teammate to read the book, TED, The Empowerment Dynamic. And this is a really simple story about 2 guys who meet on a beach, and one of them is kind of a mentor to the other. But it's about recognizing how often the dreaded drama triangle appears in our lives, where there's a perpetrator and a rescuer, and a perpetrator and a victim and a rescuer, and how quickly you can flip that dynamic to being a creator instead of a victim every time, and seeing your persecutor or as a challenger instead, different mindset, and then turning to somebody to coach you to the outcome you want versus rescuing you and going down a dark hole with you. This has been very powerful for our team to have this common language and to go back to the empowerment dynamic when we need to become creators and get out of a victim-y situation. And then another very positive part of our inclusive culture is WhatsApp. We're kind of in constant casual connection. It can be happy birthday, it can be pictures from a trial, it can be anything that's kind of happening, news from the industry, things that are happening with the climate accord. You never know what's going to pop into your WhatsApp message stream in an individual day, but we're always connected and we're always in touch in our team. 3 of the lessons that we've learned in being a self-directed organization is, first, this way of working isn't for everyone, and that's fine. You know, if you feel like it's been your life's destiny to manage people and you need to have power over a group, or your career is not going anywhere if you don't have direct reports, or that you just have to make decisions in black boxes, there's plenty of companies to do that in. It's such a normal thing in so many instances, but that's not how we work. And we care more about inclusion than power. We believe that if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. So you have to maintain and teach about trust as a skill, not trust as a concept. You have to coach to extend trust when it falls, build it, maintain it, repair it inside with partners, with suppliers, with investors. That's really important. The second lesson learned is that diversity is easy and inclusion is hard. Sometimes when we post a job in NIAGA, we'll have 95 applicants. It's a luxury problem, but we start with a panel of 16 candidates to make sure that we've had good gender diversity. After all of the Black Lives Matter protests and awareness in my own life, I think we need to work a lot harder to have a racially diverse candidate slate. We have made a ton of progress with a very gender balanced team, but we still have a lot more work to do to have a truly diverse team in the long run. And yet, when you get to a truly diverse team of experts and you work on the inclusion problems, it's hard, but it's worth it. The truth is we all bring our inner child to work sometimes, especially when it's stressful or you're behind or the temperature's a little hot. Everyone has unconscious biases, and so we have to be able to talk about that. And we do want to be in a brothers and sisters environment. That's not a family business. It's just where you can have really tough love and conversations inside of the house, but then you present a united front when you leave. And then the third lesson learned was that positive stress is still stress. You have to manage the team's very precious energy wisely. We talk a lot about the comfort zone, the stretch zone, and the panic zone. Really encourage people to work to live. And we monitor burnout. We have had 3 employees who have gone through burnouts. That's a lot for a small team. But the wonderful news is that all of them had great support from coaching and the occupational health experts. And they've not only come back stronger, but they're actually spinning more plates than ever before, and some of the stronger leaders on our team. So we've been able to support people when it did get too much, to keeping them safe and healthy and getting them through that pain. So that's what I prepared to share today, and I'm happy to open up the discussion.
Thank you very much, Kelly, for that presentation. Really a lot of food for thought. I wanted to invite you, if you wanted to stop sharing the screen so we can see everybody. Maybe we can go to the gallery view, although you're highlighted. That way we can see each other. I'm just going to post and remember everybody here that there's a Mentimeter where you can grade questions that have been already proposed. Some of you have voted for some of the questions, and I'll use that to go in that order.
It looks like Alan has got some audio problem.
Uh-oh.
And I can't take over if I keep getting muted. So, okay. All right, let's have a look then at the first question then, shall we, Kelly?
Sure.
Top of the voting so far. This is a question here about how do you manage bigger decisions like big investments or things?
Wow, that's an excellent question. Yeah, I can tell a story about an investment that we made a few years ago, because even during COVID times, we had asked for an investment in a new production line in the Netherlands to make our laminated panel products. And it was a substantial investment, €2 million request. And we as a team were having a big fight about whether that production line should be located in the north of the Netherlands or the south of the Netherlands. And there were factors about the investment itself, but then a lot of challenges where the team just wouldn't agree where they wanted to be. So they did a lot of work and they could not resolve their differences. And so they set up some time with me and they brought a beautiful presentation full of facts and they made their case and they asked me to make a decision. And I said, no, I am not going to make this decision, but I'm going to give you 6 more weeks to work this out among your team. And I'm going to ask your coach to help you through this process. And then I'll also teach you how to make a great decision yourselves. And then after 6 weeks, if you haven't figured it out, then I'll make a decision. And so they were very frustrated and a little upset about that, but then they did do the hard work of getting below the surface on what the real challenges were, talking about it as a team. They had an excellent facilitated session with their coach, and they came to the decision themselves that it should be placed in the location that it's in now. And the nice thing was, as we got into the implementation of that investment, when it was finally approved, they owned it. They had complete ownership of where it went, how it got there, how the project was going to manage, because it wasn't a decision that came down from on high where half of them liked the decision, half of them didn't. They had to go all the way through the pain to get to what was right for the business and right for them, so that once that it went into implementation, they lived without that outcome and really worked hard together to make it a success. So there are times when people would love it if I made a decision because it'd be fast. At the same time, I really resist taking on that responsibility because I think that we do a better job of making good decisions when we hear the debate and we get everybody's buy-in. Even though we don't wait for consent, we make decisions based on consent, not consensus. So someone who has responsibility for a decision has to take one, but not before understanding where the dissent is and where there are objections to their path, so that they make a fully informed decision when they do make the call.
Great. Thanks very much, Kelly. And I see that Alan is back, and so happy to pass back to Alan for the second question.
Thank you very much. And sorry for that. Life just happens in virtual. So I'll share the second question. I see that the first one was addressed. And it connects with NIAGA and now the bigger organization, Kelly. How does NIAGA link to the greater organization, and what difficulties does that setup bring? And there's a follow-up question regarding that connection, but I'll leave it there.
Okay. I think NIAGA as NIAGA came into Covestro, they were as equally curious and interested in our structure as the future of work as DSM was. Someone asked the DSM CEO now, why do you invest in NIAGA? And he said, for 3 reasons. First of all, it's a tremendous opportunity when 100 million euros every single year is spent on stuff that ends up in landfill in the trash. Secondly, it's a very cool technology. So we have come up with novel ways to support redesign and to really take responsibility for materials. And third, it's a learning organization. And the way that they work and the way that they do what they do is worth observing and worth learning from as the future. And so that was very comforting in that environment. We had a lot of support to try a different way of working. And the nice thing is Covestro has basically picked us up and dropped us into a different place in their structure, 100% intact with our team. We're still a separate legal entity. We have our brand, we have our space, as long as we deliver. So that's kind of the stipulation, is they want to learn from us and how we work and what we're doing just as much as DSM did. But of course you have to deliver to keep that space and to continue evolving what we do.
I think the follow-up question is another one that appeared, that it says, is there a chance to roll out the successful org setup of NIAGA to Covestro?
Yeah, well, within Covestro, we are a part of an organization of growth businesses. So we are one of 8 or 10 ventures that are similarly startup-ish and early stage and making our way and proving our right to exist. And I think that that's been a really cool forum because I have open doors to learn from them, and they're very curious about us. And just like the Teal Around the World community, within Covestro, there's an agile movement, and they have 2 weeks worth of agile days presentations coming up, and NIAGA will be presenting 4 times. So it's nice that we have this great space to share what we're up to, and also access to learning from other people as well.
Thank you for sharing that. You said one thing that I think connects with the following question. You say, as long as you deliver. And there's a question that says, how do performance metrics, financial partner, customer engagement, employee engagement, compare to other DSM or other companies in your industry? Is there a benchmark?
Yeah, our metrics are in the early stages of ventures in the Bell Mason framework. Your milestones are about proof points and about learning. And so when you're in the concept stage of a new venture that's never existed before, or you're in the seed stage, you're really trying to figure out if this idea that you have is something anybody needs. Is it something they care about? Is it something they want? Is it something they'll pay for? So whenever one of our ventures is in its first year or two, there are no real financial metrics except your spending budget, because you have to go prove that you have a right to be a business. And then once that we get that first paying customer on board, and we kind of get the technical readiness and the commercial readiness higher through the work with that partner, then we start having more traditional metrics like the number of units sold, or the tons of adhesive sold, or the sales and margin and EBITDA. So now that we're in our 8th year, the carpet venture is the most mature. It has the most formal metrics. And the other businesses are a mix of milestones and some clearer financial targets.
Thank you. And I wanted to share another question, and I'm putting them in the chat so you can have a look at them as well. But there's one from Robert, but I'll go to this one. Did you find a way to integrate special efforts it needs to participate in a Teal organization when hiring new employees? So if you can share a bit more of your hiring process.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, I'm really happy to share our hiring process. We just used it for the most recent hire too. And we've done it now 2 times online completely. It's so interesting to hire somebody that you've never physically met, but and onboard them that way. But I guess we're all going through that now. In NIAGA, it's a team-based decision who people want to work with. And so I told you, 2 of our positions recently had 75 to 95 applicants. We'll screen all those resumes to come up with the top 16. All 16 of those people go through a video interview on HireVue. So all of them are asked the exact same questions the exact same way, and they have to tape their video responses. So that gives us a nice foundation of everybody on an equal footing to take the group from 16 to 8. And this only takes 1 week. In the second week, those 8 people all go through interviews with the team they'll be working with, and they learn about the organization and our values and the work and the people. And those are usually team interviews, so 2 people at a time. That group of people gets together at the end of their week of interviews, and they pick 4 to move to the next round. Those 4 people get interviewed by folks from the source team, usually including me and Chris. After we've done our interviews, we get back together with the whole group, and the whole group goes from 4 to 2. Those last 2 people the next week do a case study, and they present their presentation to the whole group of interviewers. And then we pick 1. The person who has a decision for the one is in the team that has to work with them every day. So when we most recently went through this process, we ended up with 2 great candidates, and the group liked one of the candidates the most. But the people who had to work with this person every day really wanted an industry expert, and they got to make the decision about who they thought would do the best job against their particular performance requirements and their wildly important goals for this year. And now that person's coming on board. So it's a very robust process, and it seems like a lot, but it only takes 5 weeks, and we really end up with not only the candidate we want the most, but they know a lot about where they're headed to decide if it's right for them by the end of the road.
Thank you. There's Robert's question on the chat that says, do you feel your group team decision-making structure would be constructive and positive, or take away from overall productivity in a smaller manufacturing organization?
I think that inclusive ways of working can work anywhere, but it also comes down to people enrolling them in the process and picking the right people who want that responsibility. But I have kind of found that everywhere you go, people like their own ideas the most. And there have been many people in my own experience who've worked for 20 years without being involved in a lot of meetings or without being asked their opinion. And when you start asking their opinion and what they think the right thing to do is, or what they would do if it was their money, they have an answer. They have an answer every time.
Thank you. There's another question that has 3 likes or votes. Do you have any structures or habits to create and keep us the safe space? How do you see that it works? So I think you've shared some practices, but there's interest maybe to go a bit deeper on creating those safe spaces.
Well, another one that's probably, Chris, I'll ask you to maybe say if you have some ideas how we make safe spaces as well, but I also have a bilateral meeting with every single one of our teammates every month, and with my direct reports every week or two. And so that's another way that I personally kind of, as the head coach or so, try to stay in touch with each person and what's going on in their life and what's going on with their work, so that if there is something that they're having trouble with or that's creating stress for them or creating friction, that I can help coach them to create the outcome they want. Chris, what else would you say? How do we keep spaces safe in NIAGA?
What we do in our team meetings every 2 weeks, that is thumbs up or thumbs down.
Mm-hmm.
And some thumbs down, that means that you call these persons and ask what is happening. I mean, that is a moment where we see, okay, it's okay, everybody is okay, or it's not okay. And then you call these guys or girls. Yeah.
And we also take walks.
Yep.
When we have teammates who are feeling a little friction or not seeing things on the same page, we encourage them to take a coffee or go for a walk and get it out.
Thank you, Chris and Kelly. There's another question with 3 likes as well, and it maybe popped up when you mentioned the cases of burnout. No? What are the measures to prevent, or once it happens, maybe in such a demanding environment, it seems. No? So what are you working on from what you've learned from?
Yeah, so Chris is right. One of the tools that we use when we have our bi-weekly team meetings at the very end, we always put people on the group version of Teams, stadium style or whatever. And then everyone goes like this, 2 different questions. How are you feeling? And how's your workload? And anytime that people are kind of neutral or down, they get a follow-up call and some time. And since everybody has their moments, it's safe to say I'm having a bad week or I'm having a bad time. And probably another thing is we're always talking about the stretch zone versus the panic zone. And we also talk about being honest with your team when there's just stuff happening in your life. Part of being radically transparent is also being open when there are things at home that could be distracting you or taking your time away, or we care about each other enough as teammates that if there was something else happening in your life or with your parents or with one of your kids, or certainly through COVID, that talk about it. Because if you're going to be distracted or you're not here or you're overwhelmed, and it's going to affect our team and the quality of the work, then we want to support you in getting through that as fast as possible. Plus, the people who have been through burnout and who have got to the other side of it, they also watch for their teammates that they think are exhibiting those kind of feelings or those kind of symptoms or tendencies, and they have their backs. And since that was such a successful case study for the few people that have gone through burnout, they are very open about talking about it and about how they got through it and how it was appropriate to take time off and it was appropriate to step back and that they had the full support to do so. And that makes it a lot less scary for everybody else when you can live through someone else's example because they feel safe enough to share it. Other people might feel shame or that, you know, that was weakness, but it's not weakness, it's humanity. Yeah, we all are open and comfortable talking about our real worlds. And just as an example of radical transparency, I'm working through a stage 4 breast cancer diagnosis right now. My whole team knows about it. We talk about it on a regular basis. I give them updates. And it's just, we're all in it together to figure out how to keep going and going strong and sending articles and helping each other out because we do need to bring our whole self to work every day.
And thank you for that personal example of radical transparency. We're seeing a lot of hearts reacting. Thank you. Well, I just wanted to announce before the end, we've got like 7 minutes left for questions and answers. Some of them are more related to the business model, I'll call it. But there's one that I'll share. And during Kelly's last answers, I'm going to post the link to the spatial chat space we're going to open up after this session. But please do not go there until we finish, obviously, this incredible talk with Kelly Hall. So, Kelly, there's another question, and I related it. It's more on from the first idea to full implementation, how long did it take to build your circular enterprise? I heard at the beginning that you said NIAGA is an 8-year-old enterprise. Are you there at the end of the journey, or is it still continuing?
Oh no, we're not all the way there, but this is a very exciting year in our journey. We've had many milestones met every single year on the way. 2022 is a very special year because we will have front runners launching products in all 3 categories this year. So you'll be seeing more and more NIAGA tags on circular mattresses and carpets and rugs and furniture, especially throughout Europe, especially Netherlands and Germany and the Benelux. So this is a very big proof point year and a very exciting year where we finally have more and more solutions that you can actually buy and bring into your own homes and offices versus concepts and prototypes and recycled samples and things. And we as a group are forecasting to be break even in 2024. So we're still building, improving, but we'll probably be in a much steadier state in about 2 more years.
Thank you very much. There's some question that I'll share in a sec, more with, again, the business model, but I wanted to ask, and I'm introducing a question that is not in the Mentimeter, but I think it's related to one of them. You said that customers or suppliers are viewed as partners. And my question is, how do you bring the voice of the partners within the structure of NIAGA? Do they participate, for example, in the source space that you mentioned, or somewhere else?
No, they don't participate in the source team, but they do. We extend the plan on a page concept to our frontrunner partners. So when we are working very closely with a company like Alping in the Netherlands or Object Carpet, and we're doing so many different things with them to build their circular business. We've got a team working on product development. We've got a team working on how to get their stuff back and recycle it. We've got people on how do you tell the story? How do you do the digital passports? How do you get the stuff up and running? And so in those partnerships, we set a wildly important goal for the year. And then we set up that same simple 1-page plan on a page process with a regular cycle of meetings and checkpoints. So we're driving execution together as one combined team. And so that's just required when there are so many moving parts on different functional areas to get everything done, because we're not just selling them an ingredient, we're actually redesigning the products and redesigning the world with them.
Thank you. There's a couple of new specific questions that popped up in the Mentimeter. One, it says, you mentioned that some people don't fit because they really want a more traditional leadership role. What are some of the predictors of a poor fit? Talking about hiring again.
Predictors of a poor fit. I think that sometimes I'm not sure that people know themselves what they really care about until they get into a situation that ends up being uncomfortable. Because we've had some situations where people were very, very good, very, very smart, very capable, very high producers, high performers. And then when it came to living in an environment where there were no black boxes and you really needed to see each other as equal, it was just, they just wanted to make decisions without their peers, or they wanted to do things on their own. And that wasn't going to work. And that didn't make them a bad person or a bad employee. In fact, they've moved on to other jobs in the same big corporation, and that's okay. They're thriving in a different structure. But I have a friend who works at one of the top hedge funds in the world who has a self-directed structure, and she's the chief HR officer. And I was really struggling with some of this fit kind of stuff, because these are people I really care about and people I wanted to love the structure, and they just weren't liking it. And I was taking it very personally. Was I a bad coach or a bad leader for not really getting everybody into this new way of working? And she said, Kelly, it's known all around the world that this is how we work. It's highly publicized. There's books written about it. There's TED Talks about it. People come to us because they want to be a part of it. We screen for it. We really hire for that. And still 20% of the people don't work out because it's not what they thought it was going to be. And it's not easy to be this open, and it's not easy to be this transparent. And that actually just took a big burden off my shoulders, that it's just not for everyone, and that's okay. But for the folks that are willing to be fully invested and are willing to treat people as equals and are willing to help less experienced people spread their wings, it's not only very rewarding, it's a lot more fun.
Okay, so we've got 1 minute, and there's a very specific question maybe related to all the meetings that you shared, those like 3 type of meetings, and how long are they?
Oh, that's easy. The workshops are usually 3 days or afternoons. If it's a digital meeting, we try not to make people go all day online. Our bi-weekly team meeting is 1 hour with a very strict agenda, and our team coordinator facilitates that. Mm-hmm. And the plan on a page process, teams can spend lots of time building their plan on a page. And the source team meets once a month for 2 hours. So it's not a lot. It's not tons and tons and tons of meetings. That's just the minimum.
Great. Thank you very much, Kelly.